Good day, good day. Welcome, welcome. Thank you so much for tuning in. My name is Jay, and this is Homeschool Your Kids podcast. Today we have with us Donna. Donna, introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Donna Metler. I'm a longtime homeschooler and graduated homeschooler. My child is now a junior in college,
Nice.
having homeschooled all the way through. And my primary job is that I'm a music teacher. But what I'm actually talking to you about, and the other thing I do, is gifted homeschooling. Because the reason I came to homeschooling is that I had been a teacher, I'd been an education professor. And then I got a child who obviously had not read any child development books. And one of the things I realized really early was that the best thing I could do for the school system was take my little statistical outlier outside of it.
Mm.
And what I've discovered through gifted organizations through the years is that a lot of parents of gifted kids end up homeschooling for that reason. The schools are not made for our children.
Mm.
So one of the things that I've done for the last few years, as I've aged out of it, is to start advising and supporting parents and helping parents to look at your child where you are and find resources for your child where you are that are available either online. And one of the things that has led to this is that one of the resources that I found early in that my child started at age 7 was Athena's Advanced Academy, which is an online school created by a mother of gifted homeschooled kids herself that offers a la carte classes to gifted kids online. One of the coolest things about this program is that once kids get to a college level in a subject, they can start offering classes to Athenas themselves. And that can be as early as age 11, 12, 13 for some of these kids. My Elle started teaching herpetology at Athena's. And I started mentoring and supporting and being the adult in the room just in case something happened at age 12. And it has been a wonderful experience to watch these junior instructors, because there's nothing like having a group of gifted kids in a room talking about things that they are excited about. But it also, the level of maturity and development that it takes for a child to figure out how to bring their interest down to a level that other kids can understand. It's the best communication skills I can get. And it actually works the other way. This fall, I will be teaching a class at Athena's specifically on giftedness for gifted kids, where we were looking at the Disney Channel and how do they show giftedness in their shows? How accurate are they? How inaccurate are they? And the kids will be writing an education plan for a character. They will be picking a fictional character. And if I was going to homeschool this child, how would I homeschool them?
Oh, that's fun.
Which I'm hoping will lead to these kids also being able to go to their parents and say, okay, this is what we're doing that's working. This is what we're doing that isn't working.
Nice. Being able to advocate
and to advocate for themselves. So I'm really excited about this, but I think it went full circle. My now college student was actually the one who pointed out that, what you're doing with parents would work at Athena's. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes, but that'll be starting this fall.
Nice, nice. So how early did you start with the homeschooling? Because you said she was in public school
5.
at one point. 5. Okay. So
we
early.
did 1 year.
Okay.
We did 1 year. It literally took an act of the state Board of Education to get a kid into kindergarten in Tennessee early.
Mm.
And at the beginning of the year, and I will say we had a school that was bending over backwards. They were trying so hard. They were so wonderful. And the kindergarten teacher told me that, if I can give Elle 15 minutes at the beginning of the day, we're good for the rest of the day. But it also said, and by January, and because she would bring in materials from other grades, and she was really trying so hard. And then in January, we sat at the parent conference, and she asked, if this is not working, what are you going to do? And my response was, well, I've been looking into homeschooling. And her response was, you're a teacher. Take her out until the other kids learn to read and do math. That really, as it turns out, by the time we got to second, third grade, where most kids had developed their skills, my kid was on a college level in a lot of subjects. It was post high school.
Oh, wow.
And we actually did go back to school to some degree, starting at age 11 for college classes. So Elle started college classes in some subjects, starting out of math at the local community college from age 11, 12 to 16. And then at 16, finally decided that they were ready to graduate and move on.
Nice.
And is now a third year at Agnes Scott College in Decatur, Georgia.
And what is she, like 19?
Mm-hmm.
Nice.
19, has been teaching classes for 6 years.
Oh, wow. Let's talk about experience.
And the plan right now is to graduate with a degree in biology with a focus on psychology and neuroscience next year. The hope is to do 2 years of Teach for America and then go on to graduate school in neuroscience.
Okay, nice plan. And this is your only one, or you have another one?
This is my only one, but I've actually been partially homeschooling a friend's 3 children for many years. And one of them is now graduated and working and living with her boyfriend and generally having a good time of life. One graduates this year and will hopefully be going to Lindenwood College with a focus on music and political science. And then the third's in high school.
Okay, cool. So let's talk about the gifted label. How is one label gifted?
Well, the first thing I want to say is that if there is a parent who's tuning in for gifted because you've got a child who you think might be, congratulations, you have a gifted child. Statistically, parents are better at picking that up than teachers are. And guess what? If you have one gifted child, statistically, if you have other kids, congratulations, you have more than one gifted child. Having said that, so in a lot of ways, I strongly believe that self-diagnosis is valid. And there are a lot of resources out there that if you start looking for giftedness and it rings with you, this is my child, not a bad route to go on. And at Athena's, one of the things I like about Athena's is Athena's accepts parent recommendations that if you think your child is right for this class, go for it. We'll try it. So we have had 7-year-olds and 16-year-olds in the same class.
Oh, wow.
And the nice thing is, one thing about Athena's is that its camera's off. It's totally text and voice. And what that means is that 16-year-old isn't realizing there's a 7-year-old in the same room with them. So it helps to let us group by interest rather than by age, because it doesn't make the kids uncomfortable. And there's groups online like Gifted Homeschoolers Forum, where parents can join if you believe you have a gifted homeschool child. Now, having said that, there are places where identification can help. The gold standard would be to go through evaluation with an educational psychologist or a neuropsychologist. And they'll do IQ tests or do achievement testing. There's verbal and nonverbal testing, especially for kids who are 2E, and a lot of gifted kids are 2E, which means twice exceptional. That means they're gifted and they have a disability. The most common would be autism, ADHD, learning disabilities. But literally any disability that does not affect cognitive functioning can coexist. One of the families that I've had the honor of being able to mentor and support has a child with a hearing loss who is also extremely gifted. So any disability can be. And especially for kids who are 2E, it can take a really talented assessor to kind of tease that out a bit. There are nonverbal tests for kids who are less verbal, and again, for kids who are 2E, they may do better on a nonverbal test than a verbal test. Another route, and this is a route that I usually suggest that homeschoolers take unless they believe there may be a 2E issue, because it's a lot cheaper, is that most gifted programs accept out-of-level testing. And if you go through a program like Johns Hopkins CTY or the Bell and Blank Institute in Iowa, or New Mats, which is at Northwestern in Chicago, you can sign your child up to do an out-of-level test. Typically, this is going to be the SAT, ACT, SAT 8-9, when it used to be the Explorer, but I don't think that's done anymore. So you're taking a test that is for students 4 to 5 years ahead of your 8th grade level. And what they can do with this is they can look at the profile and see, okay, this is how gifted kids tend to perform on this test. And a lot of programs will accept those scores for entry. One of the ones that I really want to highlight to parents, if you have a child who qualifies, is the Davidson Institute. It's out of Reno, Nevada. This is a private foundation set up by Robin Jan Davidson. If you were a kid in the 80s and you went to the computer lab, you probably saw the Davidson name on the software. That's what they put their money into. Was that, when they retired and they sold their program, they put their money into helping profoundly gifted kids. And if you have a score that tests in the right percentile, you can apply. It's a kind of annoying involved process where you can submit a portfolio and recommendations in that. But then if they accept your child, that opens up this wonderful network of parents, of alumni. They have online classes, they have online workshops, they have summer experiences. And this program, which does not cost, as long as you have the scores, it does not cost anything to apply. This program connected my kid with professional herpetologists because that was the special interest at the time with snakes. And that led to being able to work on projects, to presenting at conferences. We went to New Zealand, and Elle presented at the 9th World Congress of Herpetology at age 15 with the PhDs and professionals. That's the kind of connections that these programs can open. One of the things that I do, and especially when I'm working with kids or when I'm working with parents, we look at fictional things. So for example, if you had young Sheldon Cooper, from the TV show, and he's 9, and you don't want to send him to high school with high school kids, because if you've seen the show, that was not a good choice. You would look at, what I would suggest was take those test scores and have Sheldon and apply to Davidson. Look at the online classes that Davidson offers. Apply for the Stanford Online High School, which is going to provide upper level math and physics courses for him. And then what the parent can do is put their child into those classes in those areas that they can't teach at home, because you're not going to be able to teach Sheldon Cooper at home unless you're a theoretical physicist. But you probably can teach him history. Maybe we can do a timeline look at history of science and then follow those paths and study the history of it. We can read literature from that time period and related to it. We can do all that at home and support his areas where maybe he's still a gifted kid. And then what we can do is that we can look at, for example, is there a science Olympiad team? If he was here in Memphis, I would say that'd be one to go to, because that'll put him with other kids who love science. But since on Science Olympiad, each student works on their own project and competes in their own project area, he could compete in physics while another child, like say mine, who's very into biology, could compete in biology. 4-H clubs can be a wonderful social outlet for gifted homeschooled kids, because 4-H isn't just ag anymore. They do rocketry, they do robotics. And again, it's often very, very affordable, because some of these online classes, you might be spending your entire homeschool budget on 1 or 2 of these classes, because they do add up. I would suggest looking at a program like Athena's because of the leadership opportunities, but also because, again, it'll get him with other gifted kids. And we have moderated social forums that let you, and a moderated Minecraft server and things like that let kids interact online in safe ways with an adult who's usually a parent of gifted kids, keeping an eye on what's going on. Because often, for some of these kids, obviously giftedness is like a lot of things where there's different levels of it. But especially for these kids who are at the very tail end of the spectrum, they may not have anybody else in their orbit that thinks the way they do. And sometimes online or these summer camps and opportunities can give them a chance to realize that I'm not the only one in the world, which serves 2 purposes. Number one, they feel like they belong. And it's wonderful to see them interacting with each other at that level. But it also means they realize that I'm not the smartest person in the world out there. Because it can be a really, really hard situation when you've always been the best at everything. and then you hit a wall and you're not. And one of the things that happens unfortunately often is that these kids get to college and they crash and they burn.
Oh, wow.
Because they have never failed at anything in their life. Things have always been easy. But even if they go to a state university and they're in the honors program, that's where all these smart kids congregate. If they go to a school like Harvard or MIT, even more so. But even at a regular state university, there's going to be a lot of smart people there. And some of those people will be as smart as you are.
Okay. Nice.
Yeah.
So you spoke early on Gifted. What were some of the things that you saw in your child early on that you was like, okay, she's on her own
Well,
level?
the one that hit me first was literally, this was a baby who couldn't walk yet. This was a 15-month-old that we were in the park in the stroller, and there was a sign that said, all dogs must be on a leash. I looked around, where's the dog? And I realized that this kid just read that sign.
She said, where's
the dog?
Said,
yes.
Where's the dog?
Yes. And I was used to the fact, Elle had talked early and put sentences together. One of my mother's stories is being in the gift shop at the Peabody Hotel in Memphis, which had all these ducks. And which had all these ducks. And Elle looked around and like, oh, do you like the ducks? Elle looked up, pointed to one at the top. I like that duck at 12 months old. So I was kind of used to the early talking, but the early reading and realizing that this child is reading was what hit me like, okay, we have totally thrown out the book here.
Yes.
Okay, are you still there? All right, are you back?
Yeah, it blanked out on me. Okay.
So
I'm gonna have to edit this. Go back to the dog on a leash, and her reading. After that, it started breaking up.
After that,
I heard that
we had, that I'd been used
not
to
clearly. So
I'd been used
you can
to
go
early,
back to her reading the sign.
And like I realized that, okay, this is, there was no way in the world, there was no context clue for dog other than that sign. There would be no reason to expect it. And that kind of hit me that, okay, this child just read this sign and formulated a question based on that. And I was used to having a child who was talking early. So the idea of the sentences didn't bother me, but the reading did, because everything in my experience said that that's something you expect in like a 4 to a 5-year-old. Those are the first signs of decoding that we're starting to pick up sight words. There was nothing in my experience that led me to say that they expect this in a 1-year-old. And then from there, it was other things. But before kindergarten, it was keeping a running total. Like we'd be in the supermarket and Elle would keep a running total of the items. And that, it just, there were a lot of those early signs. And basically by kindergarten, by age 4, I had a child who was reading almost anything and understanding it, but was still acting like a preschooler. Which is why we pursued early entry and early kindergarten, thinking that would be, thinking that the idea of waiting another year, especially for a child with a fall birthday who would be almost 6 before starting kindergarten, would not be a good fit. And the idea that, okay, this child's gonna miss the Elle's going to miss the cutoff date by about 6 weeks. So we applied for a waiver on that and got it. And as I said, the school really tried. They did a good job. They did about as good a job as they could do. But I agree. But when you have the kindergarten teacher telling you, yeah, no, this is not going to work. Because she said the only reason it worked was that she had a full-time assistant and no other grade had that. And no other grade was going to be able to give this 15
Yeah, and
minutes.
a lot of kindergarten classes don't even have that anymore.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, putting a child that's what now 5 and has been speaking in complete sentences since she was what 1.
Yeah.
And
reading since age 1
okay, so did the reading come like had y'all practice any
the
phonetics
reading,
or anything?
no, not intentionally. Now, having said that, I am, I'm an educator. So going through things like labeling things in the house was just something I did because that's something that you do with early childhood. But I never sat down and intentionally taught to read. And in fact, everything I knew said that that's the worst thing you can do. You don't teach, you can't force it. You have to wait for those developmental signs. So we didn't, I didn't teach it. Now, one thing I realized, we also went through a phase of alphabets and of every single possible, and of letters in different languages. And I remember, again, this was being down at the college because I was teaching part-time and having my child in the store go 3 triangles, L tipped over, X. And I realized that my child was reading the Greek letters on the fraternity houses. L tipped over, like, wait. So for a while we got a Hebrew alphabet puzzle. And for a while when we first started homeschooling, we were doing Spanish, Greek, and Latin along with English, which was real fun because I'd had a little bit of Spanish in high school. I'd had some Spanish. I had some French. I had a little bit of Latin, no Greek. So I was trying to learn this along with this young child who was just passionate about languages.
Nice.
And passionate about alphabet. And for a while we were going down to we were fortunate in that my husband was working for a company that included a membership at the Jewish Community Center. So we went down to things at the Jewish Community Center regularly in Hebrew because of the fact that my child was just so passionate about the languages. And this was the preschooler.
Wow.
And then, so, that was my first instance in homeschooling something that I did not know myself.
And that's what I was going to ask because, you talk to parents who are kind of intimidated by the notion of just homeschooling kids on regular levels. So you're talking about a child who basically came out the womb already knowing language and everything else.
Yeah.
How did you approach that? How did that make you feel? Like, how do you keep yourself on a up level? Yes.
It's intimidating. And in some ways, I've had parents go, well, you could do it because you were a teacher. It's like, actually being a teacher and having an education background in some ways made it harder. Because I knew how things were supposed to go. And I knew it was supposed to be appropriate for this age. And that what Elle was demanding was not appropriate. So what you really have to do is do the next thing and look at what your child does. So that included things like emailing a professor at a college in Spain to find out Spanish names for dinosaurs. At one point, that included getting books in Latin and Greek and getting song school Latin and doing it with my child and learning it along with them. But that also included knowing which things I needed to find somebody else to help with and which things I needed to outsource and kind of looking at what can I do, what can somebody else do.
Okay.
Because again, if you have Sheldon Cooper, you're not going to be able to teach him theoretical physics unless you're a theoretical physicist yourself. But you probably can teach him and do math and do history and do language arts and things like that with him. And one of the things that I started doing, and again, it's something I probably wouldn't have done had I not had some of the other parents in the Davidson forums suggesting that I do it, was I started getting college syllabi. So for example, we did a homegrown entomology class, bugs. And what we found was a syllabus from North Carolina State University, bought the textbook, and then just went online and found labs that we could do. Things like observing mealworm, doing ethnograms and observing insects. We borrowed some hissing cockroaches from a friend and observed their behavior. We bought 3D puzzles and assembled them and then drew the anatomy. So it ended up being a pretty good entomology class, even though I'm not a biologist, because I pulled in these resources from outside. And a lot of times, if you look on websites, college classes especially often have their syllabi, and they can become a really useful resource. We did another one where we used an anatomy and physiology book and went through and analyzed all those plastic Halloween skeletons. How accurate were they? Where were they wrong? For a biology-focused kid. So these were in areas that was else focused of interest, but we were able to use resources that we had. And in fact, I've seen Elle pull some of these projects that we did in homeschooling into the classes that they now teach. Because those things that, again, you can do with a group of homeschoolers. You can have everybody bring in one of these animal skeletons from your Halloween box at home. And we're going to look at the skeleton of a real animal. What did they get right? What did they get wrong? So it's kind of neat to see that. And your parents can be creative, but other parents are going to be your best resource. Other parents who've been a little bit
How did you find
on,
your community?
Yeah, find your community. And that Gifted Homeschoolers Forum is wonderful. If you go to the Well-Trained Mind forums, are primarily classical homeschooling, but they have what they call the Accelerated Learner Forum. And that is a wonderful resource. Those have been by people for years. I love the Well-Trained Mind forums. If your kid's in one of these programs like Davidson or Stanford Online High School, there will be private Facebook groups for parents in that program. And they are wonderful. But, other parents will be your best resource. Because they'll be the ones who suggest, and they'll also be the ones who suggest, this online class is good. This school's good. That's actually how we found Athena's in the first place, was recommendations from other parents. And that's one reason why that's one reason why I started. I actually, the first time I did a workshop for parents was because the local homeschool group was doing a conference. I put in that I wanted to do a music workshop, and their response was, "You talk about giftedness on the local forum a lot. Can you come talk to us about gifted homeschooling?" Because we have parents who need that. So that's kind of what led me to do it. It's not that I'm an expert at it so much as that I'm just someone who's been a little farther on the way. I've lived through it. I've survived.
I was about to say, yeah, because you are doing, you have.
Yeah,
you have the gift of being. So yeah.
Yeah. So it's a different, and that's a lot of the best resources I've found. And a lot of the best resources for gifted homeschoolers especially are the ones that come from parents of gifted kids, because they start out with, what does my child need? And a lot of times what their child needs also matches what others need.
Yeah, because y'all are going beyond the standard, because the standard keeps everybody at the average level, but you have children that are well beyond the average level. So it just.
Well, and the big thing to keep in mind with gifted kids is that is that a gifted 9-year-old who's working on a high school level is still a 9-year-old. And in some ways, they may actually be less mature emotionally, especially, again, if they're 2E, but also they may or may not have the skills. They may have not had a lot of experience interacting with other kids, because other kids aren't on that level intellectually. They can't connect with them. So you want to give them that time to grow up and develop emotionally while still feeding that academic need. That intellectual need is, they have to have that. But it's not necessarily the case that you want to move them ahead faster. And honestly, homeschooling is about the only way to do this that doesn't hold them back or push them ahead. Because even if you have to go to college classes in some areas, and this is something that I honestly do recommend, it works very well for my family, they can go to the college math class and do calculus with 18, 19-year-olds. And they can come back and go to the park day with the 9, 10, 11, 12-year-olds. And they can hang out and have fun with the other kids their age. And because they've already gotten that intellectual stimulation done early, it's a lot easier for them to play around with the other kids and to talk about stuff that the other kids want to talk about. So it's almost like priming the pump in a way. Similarly, finding areas that they're not good at is important. For my kid, it was cheerleading. We did cheer for years. Not particularly good at it, not particularly coordinated. There were kids who just were so much better. But having that experience of being part of a team and working at something that's hard is so valuable when school is easy. And when school is easy, when you're with people who are a lot older than you are. For other kids, and for some of the kids I teach, it's music. They like music. They're not necessarily the most talented at music, even though they're talented at other things. Sports can be wonderful. But you actually, in some ways, want your gifted kid to be the kid who's the third string bench warmer on the basketball team. Because then they have to work to try to get off that bench when maybe they don't have to work so hard in other parts of their lives.
Like a humbling piece, like a humbling factor.
Well, and it's a chance that they can have other chance where they have to learn to ask for help from other people. Because there was a point at which Elle was helping 3/4 of the junior high, the middle school cheer team trained at the same gym we did. And they come over for practice, and Elle would end up helping them with their algebra homework. And then they'd help Elle with tumbling. And at the time, Elle was taking college math classes, college math and science classes. So, it was a chance to interact with kids the same age and for it to be a mutual support system, which otherwise you don't get. I mean, Elle was also helping college classmates with their homework.
Nice. So how do you keep that? Because you talked about the intellectual, like the academics part being there, like she has that emotionally and being able to express herself in the ages that she was in because of like her being, like you said, being not necessarily around peers, but being around older individuals, but still being 9 nonetheless, like, and operating and being able to express themselves emotionally at a 9-year-old level, but performing academically on an 18, 19-year-old level.
Yep.
How do you find that balance?
Well, what I discovered is that if you build it, they will come.
Mm-hmm.
So what we did was we did clubs. Is that I ran clubs for years in areas that Elle was interested in and that other kids were. So for years, we did a mythology club where we did the national mythology exam. And this is another thing I strongly recommend for parents of gifted kids. The American Classical League is very, very gifted kid friendly. So we would just put out on the local homeschool forums, all right, we're going to do this. We're going to get together once a month. We're going to talk about mythology. And what happened was that each kid would present something each time. They would all prepare something about that topic for that month. And then in April, when the test came out, we would sit the exam together. And they would all, they'd all cheer, they'd all take the exam, they'd all celebrate. And what this did was it gave a way to interact intellectually, but it was, again, kids who were interested in it. And what happened was we had an hour of academic stuff, and then we had an hour of running around the backyard being silly, acting out Greek and Roman battles. Or an hour of throwing water balloons at each other. And that provided a steady peer group of kids who did things together. And as the time went on, we started to find, okay, this child's interested in bats. Let's do something about bats. This child's interested in physics. Let's make catapults and do egg drop projects. So it kind of grew to supporting each other. And then again, if you find a homeschool community, one thing that's nice about homeschoolers is that they usually are multi-age settings. So you can find the perk days and the field trips and the social stuff. And I will say that the homeschool group we founded, we referred to ourselves at times as being the refugee homeschoolers, because almost all of us had kids who they just did not fit into a school setting. Almost half of us had teaching degrees, and we were teachers, and our kids just didn't fit. So find a group that matches you, because you may not fit in a group of parents who plan to homeschool from the time their children were babies, because that's what everybody in their church does. But
you didn't plan to homeschool.
Yeah, you don't plan to it. And there's parents who will homeschool no matter what. And that may or may not be a group you fit in. They might be wonderful women. You might fit in with them perfectly. But you may find that you fit in better with the refugee homeschoolers for whom the homeschool didn't work, for the school system didn't work. And I'm just going to try to hang on for another year, and maybe the next school will be better. And then every year they realize, yeah, no, not going to work this time either. And some of them will go back for school for high school, some won't. And you just go with it. And that worked really well for us until, I will say that Elle graduated in 2020 or in 2021. And 2020, 2021 totally, it shattered our homeschool community. And I will say that with the high schoolers I work with now, with my what I call my bonus kids, it's been a lot harder to make that community again because it broke. And while the younger parents and the younger kids are rebuilding it, it's been really hard for the high schoolers. A lot of the high schoolers went back to school in 2021 because I just didn't have that. They had that year of nothing. So it's been a little harder for those guys now. And for the one who's graduating this year, where he's found his community has been that he's a swim coach and lifeguard. So he gets a lot of his community at the pool. And that's ended up helping. So that's ended up helping to rebuild part of that. And again, that's not the fact, the fact that he's a talented musician and writer doesn't affect that. Isn't affected at the pool, but it means that he gets to hang out with other teenagers who are also swim coaches. So that's helped to rebuild that a little bit, because the homeschool community kind of fell apart a bit for a couple of years there.
Gotcha. But you host workshops and for gifted parents, for parents that have gifted children.
Yeah, what I usually do, I do them for things like the conference coming up in July in Memphis. That's what I'll do. Come in and I'll help. What we'll do is we'll walk through an example of, this is how you look at your child. This is what we look at examples. And I can also point them towards resources that exist in Memphis, because I know specifically what's here. But a lot of times when I work with parents that we'll just sit down over coffee and we'll do exactly that. We'll sit down. Okay, what are you good at? What is your child good at? What areas do you feel comfortable teaching? What areas do you go, okay, this kid is scaring me. I have no prayer of being able to understand this. And just talk and just do it. And sometimes we'll actually do sessions where I'll tutor a child for a while with the parent in the room so they can see how I interact with the child. And they can see things like, this is how we can use games for a kid who's good at math, but doesn't really like doing book work. This is how I can see what they can do in math without having to make them write stuff down. But the whole goal is for the parent to take over the education.
Gotcha. And then you also do music.
Yes.
How do you fit music into all of this?
I'm busy. But with that, I teach. What I have is that I teach at Singleton Community Center, which is through Parks and Rec. And I have my private piano students who range in age from 3 up to adult. And I would say that almost half of my kids are gifted in 2E. I seem to get a lot of them. And then I also teach classes during the day for homeschoolers. And those are so much fun. My current homeschool class has kids from age 7 to 17. And what we'll do is we will come together and we will figure out how are we going to break down this arrangement? How are we going to play this with the instruments we have? How are we going to use the instruments we have in the classroom? Because you have kids who can't read music yet and kids who are extremely advanced. And they learn to support each other. And in fact, my older homeschoolers are supporting my preschoolers. So yesterday we worked on how are we going to support, what are we going to do to play along with these preschoolers and support my preschool students? Because they're part of the community too. And what it ends up being is a social group. The other thing that I love is that my homeschoolers, I have my homeschool class set up, and we have a homeschool art class in the morning. And then we have a half-hour break, and I have a homeschool music class in the afternoon. So they all hang out in my room for that time in between and eat lunch and just socialize together. And it's great to see them get to do it in a very relaxed environment. And some of these kids are in the same activities together. Some of them go to the same tutorials together. Some of them don't. So that's been, that's been fun because that's, that's my primary job. And that's what I moved to after homeschool.
Okay.
That's what I moved to after homeschooling was that about the time that Elle started doing most of the classes at the college. And I realized that I'm really not homeschooling much anymore. I started with 1 day a week, and then it's now moved up to I teach 5 days a week.
Oh, wow. Okay. Do you
But
teach all instruments or?
I teach piano, woodwinds, and percussion.
Okay.
Not a brass player, not a string player.
Gotcha. Sweet. And y'all meet in person or is this virtual?
We meet in person.
Okay.
Yeah, the Athena stuff's online, but Singleton's in person.
Okay. Cool. Nice. I love what you got going on and what you're sharing with families, because I'm sure a lot of parents definitely need your assistance with helping to understand what to do with their geniuses.
Yes. Well, I mean, what the title I use for workshops is Hang On Tight to the Ears. And it comes from a quote from Robert A. Heinlein that when riding a tiger, the principal thing to remember is hang on tight to the ears and don't look down. And the fact is, homeschooling a gifted kid feels like you went to the shelter and you adopted a kitten. You knew what to expect with a kitten. You'd read all the books about having a kitten, except that now your kitten is much bigger and it has claws and teeth and it can rip you to shreds. And you're trying to figure out what the heck do I do with this tiger cub? And worse yet, when you go to other parents, a lot of them look at you and go, don't be a tiger mom. They're a baby, just take care of them. And that's what we want to find is we want to find that you're not being a tiger mom when your 6-year-old is working on has memorized multiplication tables. Or when your 7-year-old is printing out placement tests for algebra and doing them and leaving them on your computer, which happened, by the way. You're not being a tiger mom to start doing algebra with your 7 and 8-year-old when they want to do algebra. You're not being a tiger mom to be doing Latin with a 5-year-old who wants to learn Latin. You're not being a tiger mom to let your 12-year-old till up the backyard and turn it into a garden because they are fascinated with plants and growing things. You are not pushing them. They are pulling you. You are hanging on tight and trying not to fall down.
Yes.
And that's what I want parents to know is that that's okay. And especially if your homeschool community is on the unschooly side and on the let them go at their own pace, it can be really hard where you can have parents go, you really can feel like you don't fit in. Because you've got the kid who they need to have 4 hours of school or they're bouncing off the walls. And parents are going, yeah, we do 30 minutes a day, we're good. And you're going, if my child doesn't do an hour of math a day, I can't get into bed at night. Because that need is so strong, it has to be filled. And the other thing I want parents to know is that it is okay to say, I can't do it alone. Because for me, I don't know that I could have done it all the years without those online classes. Because for those online classes, there was an hour that my child was interacting and talking with and bouncing things off of other people and other gifted kids, and an adult who was there to provide feedback, but also to rein it in and to steer it in the right direction. The writing classes, especially, history was something that ended up being really good to do through some of these online programs, because one of the things you see with gifted kids is that they become very hypersensitive. They pick up on implications. So, for example, we could not get past the Civil War and Reconstruction in my house when we tried it at home, because every time we did, and we got into Reconstruction of civil rights, Elle was very aware that this was something that was very recent in time, that this had happened right here, that there were people who were still alive who had lived through this, and it was just too much emotionally. It would lead to meltdowns. By doing that with other gifted kids and doing it with Kirsten at Athena's, they were able to be other gifted kids saying, yeah, this is awful, this is horrible. And because it was awful and horrible as a group, they could start thinking about what can we do? So you end up with kids who are very strong advocates and are very socially justice focused because they've now been able to steer that. And in fact, one of the instructors at Athena's is currently a PhD religion major. And that's pretty much what she did, was she's gone into social justice peacemaking focus. So that's what she teaches, is social justice. And that can happen with literature, where books can get too intense, especially if they're reading above level, and doing it with other kids can get them past that hump. So because other kids their age don't pick up on the man's inhumanity to man, but another gifted kid does. So that's the point where it's okay to ask for help. It is okay to outsource some of this stuff so that you have the strength to be a parent the rest of the time. Because it's exhausting.
I'm sure
It can be very hard. It can be very exhausting. And you need that. So that's where you need that support network. Indeed. I'll also say that if you don't have other parents of gifted kids in your area and you want support from other parents, you want a parent who will hear you and listen and understand that I love this kid, I'm doing the best I can, find parents of kids with disabilities. But especially parents of kids with autism. My autism, those are the parents, those have saved my life at times. Because it might be, their child might still be working on learning to read in some cases. Their children were struggling in a lot of different ways, but they understood in ways that sometimes parents of smart kids who were not at the same level of intensity did. So, find those parents, find that network, find it online, find it in person, but find the person who will understand when you are just in tears and can't go on, and will tell you, yeah, I understand. And they may understand it because they've been there in a totally different way, but they've been there. Because that's what's going to get you through.
Support, community is needed. And I know you said earlier, Donna, that build it and they will come. So even if you don't have the necessary
you sometimes
community,
you build it. And and one of the things that I will also say about building it, when I first started homeschooling, I was really nervous about hosting stuff because we went to some of these things at other people's houses and they had these really awesome setups and these gorgeous ones. I'm like, I don't have that. But I realized what I did have was a screen porch. So we did a lot of things outside on that screen porch in the backyard.
Nice.
Because I didn't necessarily have the room to have a dozen people in my house, but we could have people in the backyard. You can meet at local parks. We did park day for a long time. You can find library community rooms. There are resources. Don't feel embarrassed if you don't necessarily have the resources that some of the people in your community have. Because trust me, if you want to get the kids together to do messy science projects, there will be parents who will be more than happy to do that with you. And you'll discover after you talk to these parents that some of them, they feel that everybody feels inadequate in different ways. So, the parent who looks like they have the perfect house and everything's pulled together, and you wonder how the heck, how can they do this? And you discover afterwards that they feel like they're falling apart too.
Yeah, everybody has their struggles that they don't necessarily talk about or wear on their sleeve. So, yes.
So you discover that, don't feel embarrassed to put yourself out there and try. Because there are other parents who are in the same boat. And you're going to discover that some of the parents who look like they have it all together don't.
Do not.
Because, I have not met many homeschoolers who feel like they're being successful at it, even when they absolutely are.
Yes.
And part of the thing about homeschooling is that there's nobody to blame. If your child is struggling in public school, yes, you can feel bad as a parent, but you can also say it's a teacher, it's a school, it's their fault. When you homeschool, it's on you. So if you've got the kid who just can't master a skill, you're freaking out about it. It's like, okay, I failed as a teacher, I failed as a parent. And let me tell you, even if you've got the kid who academics is easy, there's going to be something else that they struggle with. They're going to be the kid who says something on the playground to hurt some other kid's feelings and just doesn't realize they did it. They're going to be the kid who just doesn't necessarily have the common sense to come in out of the rain. They're going to be the kid who struggles with executive functioning and who they're great at doing stuff, but you despair how they're ever going to survive on their own because the only reason they can do it is that you're being their frontal cortex. But you know what? They all get through. And when you look at them on the other side, it's worth it.
Nice. Actually, Donna, I talked to a couple of parents that kids, but they never talked on this level of reaching and how to identify or teach or meet them where they're at and things of that nature. So I really appreciate this. You taught me much. I didn't even know what 2E was. Now I know. So I appreciate all of this. Where can we find you? Where can we look you up?
Okay, you can find me on Making Music with Kids. That's my Facebook page for my studio. If you go on, as I said, if you go on to Gifted Homeschoolers Forum or to Well Trained Mind forums and you ask them, was any question about Gifted, I'll probably be there. And I'm DM Metler on Well Trained Mind.
With Kids.
And of course, if you want to do online classes, if your kids want to do my gifted classes or want to do classes about almost any subject, check us out at Athena's Advanced Academy. And in fact, Elle will be teaching 2 classes that start next week, one on herpetology and one on animal behavior, and I'll be the moderator and mentor for those classes. And there will be several, and there will be other mid-spring classes will be starting next week.
Okay, cool. Before I let you go, can you give 3 things
Okay, you're breaking up a little. Can you repeat that?
have 3 pieces of advice for get to move.
Okay, the first.
Yes, I know this lovely internet.
Okay,
you got it.
Okay, the first thing is trust yourself. Trust your parent instincts. Trust your parent radar. Number 2, trust your child. If they are saying that this is something I need, this is something I want to do, go for it, even if it means putting some other things to the side. And number 3, don't be afraid to ask for help.
Oh, yes.
You don't have to do it alone.
Nice. Nice, nice. Thank you so much, Donna. Yes, parents, you heard her. Ask for help. Look, do your research, find the support, find your community. If you don't have a community, you can build your community. Just understand that this is not a journey that you have to do alone. Don't get overwhelmed with those scholars that you have that came out the womb reading full books and being able to identify things that you don't know how in the world they got there. Seek help. Seek help. Please, please, please. But just know that this is not a journey you have to take alone. So yeah, homeschool your kids.